The storytelling component was something that I really worked hard on. The TLDR on how to tell a story is just...
So when you're thinking about the ideation piece, right? So is that like, are you separating that into another day? Is that like on the same day? And then how are you thinking about like the hooks, the stories, all that type of stuff?
The team brings everything.
Okay.
So the team brings everything from like, because they'll watch this podcast and then they'll be like, dude, that story was interesting. Can we do a thing on that? And then, because like they basically the team is inherently curious people who like my content, and so like to use some Gary terms, like they fuck with my content, and so the stuff that they want to know more about, we go into more depth on.
Yeah.
And so I haven't been asked to come up with topics in a really long time.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you how I would come up with topics, because this is how I was doing it when it was just me starting out, is that I just like to use time as my like anchor for this. So I go far past, which is like, what are the life-changing experiences or conversations that I've had that have shaped the way my worldview? And so those are stories that I will tell because I think they're impactful and people get value from them. Then I have recent past, which is like, let me look at my calendar over the last week and just look at all the meetings I had. And I just like, I would have my phone up and be like, okay, so I was talking to one of our portfolio companies who's trying to make a change on pricing. And so this is what we were considering, you know what I mean? I just literally go through what my life was. I have present, which is whenever something comes up in the moment, I always have a way to like brain dump it. And so for me, Twitter or X is kind of my brain dump. Whenever
Threads?
Yeah. Or well, they repost stuff.
Got it.
But Twitter is my home base for that.
Yeah.
And so they'll also come with the tweets that they thought were like interesting to make more content about. And then you've got like manufactured, which is stuff that doesn't exist at all.
What's an example?
Like I lived on $100 for 30 days. Like here's what happened. I'm just, like as an example, that wouldn't be one that I would make, but like because somebody else could make that.
Yeah.
But stuff like that, and then like case studies and vlogs. So those are kind of like the buckets that we think through. But most of you'll notice is just like real stuff. So we don't have to come up with like, what would people find interesting? Like, well, this is what I did. And if they find it interesting, awesome.
And what's like the micro there? Is it like one day at a time, they just dump a bunch of topics on you?
Well, when we do recording, because we record like twice a month.
Okay. And this is what? How much in a day? How many
it's
hours?
A full day.
Okay.
So it's 2 full days a month is when we do the recording. Once we get the headquarters, it'll probably be smaller chunks more frequently. But for right now, it's just like 1 8-hour day, twice a month.
Got it.
But they'll have like full like 6-page pre-productions for every video.
Nice.
Of like these are the themes, these are the 4 or 5 stories that we think are that we've pulled from your other pieces that we think would tie well together around this topic. I talked to the team to get stats on some of these companies for this case study. So like the media team now will talk to our subject matter experts at Holdco to get like, hey, what was new this week? Did you guys do any implementations or whatever? And then they'll take that and then repackage it, and then that'll become content.
Dude, I mean, this is a sidebar here, but like, I know even with Caleb and my just sense in general, like you like to be friends with your staff, right? And which I think is good. And that's how they really understand what you want and how you think as a person. Yeah. How do you indoctrinate them into your way of thinking? I mean, like a chief of staff would just be sitting and watching you and shadowing you for a couple months, right?
Yeah, I think it's osmosis.
Okay.
I think it's just proximity and exposure. Yeah. And that's why I'm so excited for the headquarters. It's funny because as a previously remote before it was cool, you know, that's how we scaled gym launch. Everything we had was remote, and this will be, since my brick and mortar chain, this will be the first in-person stuff I've done. But it's weird because I feel incredibly confident at how much of a game changer I think it's going to be.
Dude, I mean, here's where I'm at, right? And maybe my staff might crucify me for saying this if they find it, but I'm an introvert, and I've been working remote at tech companies for the longest time, and like we were doing hybrid even before the pandemic hit, like a couple of years, 3-2. But I'm just like, dude, you cannot replace like this, right? Like this is a relationship, and it goes much further. And I just think commercial real estate is going to come back in the next 5-10 years. So it just seems to be moving that way, because how are you supposed to, if there's this, how can you compete?
Yeah.
Right.
I think, you know, this is kind of interesting is like, if we had like an SOP on how to handle difficult conversations, right? Or bad news, whatever. If I teach an SOP around that, people will be like, okay, got it. These are the steps. But it's incredibly different to see me get bad news and then watch what happens. Yeah. Like it's a completely different experience. And I think that is something that becomes memorable.
Yeah.
And that's what can change someone's behavior way faster.
Yeah. I mean, dude, that in itself is a story, and people remember stories.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to your videos, because you're pretty good at just your memory, I think is really good. I just forget stuff, right? But it's like you seem to weave into stories pretty well. Like, how much is it just second nature to you now? How much are you thinking about your stories when you're creating content?
Yeah. So the storytelling component was something that I really worked hard on, and I have continued to work hard on for almost probably 6 years. So when I started Gym Launch and I had to start teaching, basically when I had to start teaching, I realized that teaching was making connections between things that people understand and things that they don't. And so that's why metaphors and analogies are so strong, because they're like, okay, so energies, so you're kind of like a car. And if you put your gas in, it's kind of like your body. And the food, you know what I mean? So it's like, I understand this, but I don't understand this, but I can apply the same principles. And so when I realized that I used to just kind of like lecture people on like jargon, right? Their eyes would roll over and I just didn't get the desired result. So I had to start learning, like, so then I started reading books on how to tell stories. And the TLDR on like how to tell a story is just, you have a character, you have an unmet desire, you have an obstacle, you have a guide who comes in with some sort of solution. The person tries the new way, it works, and then there's an internal achievement and an external achievement, meaning like who did they become in the process and what happened on the outside. And so like I just pretty much just try and think through that process of like desire, unmet desire, obstacle, guide, plan, execution, result.
The fact that you can just roll that off your tongue means like it is burned into you. Right, because I mean, I just it's like sounds like the Harmon Circle.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I mean,
like
the stories are the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.